Oh, I love the smell of carbon in the morning. Today's episode is brought to you by Splurg. Oh my god, it's Splurg! Hello and welcome back to Gardening with Andrew. Today, we're looking at the wonderful world of decomposing matter. That's right, folks, we're talking about compost and how incredibly easy it is. You don't need any expensive equipment like big turning drums or little packets of microbiomes you add to a cute little thing that sits on your countertop. No, none of that. We're just making some bins, we're putting stuff in the bins, and we're gonna turn it every once in a while. Bada bing, bada boom, we got ourselves some fresh, amazing soil for our garden to grow the biggest, juiciest, most wonderfulest produce in the land. I spend 10 minutes a month making compost, and it builds the best soil I have in my garden, way better than anything I could buy. I'm gonna show you how to do it. Let's get kicking. So here is our 3-bin system. Over here, we have one lid. We probably should have 2. This one needs a lid also, but we just put hay on top of it. That kind of works. In the middle here is the one we're dumping stuff into. So this is stuff coming straight from the garden and from our kitchen. We just plop it in there and then use this bad boy to give it a little stir. So you need some way to move your compost from inside your house to outside your house. A bowl would work, but it's gonna stink. So a bowl would work. I wouldn't advise it because you'll get sick of the smell after a while and you'll stop doing it. So what we have is a nice little metal container with a lid specifically designed for compost, which seals when the lid is on there, but it's easy to work with, and the whole thing is glass and metal, so it's super easy to clean. So something like that would definitely be the way to go.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them.
Compost is not rotting stuff. I mean, it can happen, but that's bad. You don't want that to happen. When you do compost right, it means that you're turning your plant matter into excellent new soil that didn't exist before, that you can add to your garden. But when you don't treat it right, it does smell terrible. So a good healthy compost bin won't stink at all, but we still do want lids on it to keep the moisture in. A compost bin can be any size and it can work for your setup, but the key is we want to have 3 stages of it. A beginning phase, a middle phase, and a late phase. And we're going to move between those one at a time. Basically, you fill one up, and then you move on to the next one. And then you fill that one up, you move on to the next one. And then you fill that one up. And hopefully, if all went well, by the time the third one is full, the first one, which you've been turning regularly, will be broken down enough that you can use it in the garden. Okay, for the tools you need to make a compost bin, the big one is the compost bin, right? Those you can buy from the store. The one we have are like little plastic locked together puzzle piece type things, which is okay. They do come apart basically every time we use them, and they kind of drift off when they're empty, so they're sort of annoying. If you could get something where the three parts are connected, and there's still divisions in the middle, so there's still three parts, something that holds together and is kind of heavier than what we have, I think would work out better. If you are the DIY sort, it's pretty easy to just get some wood, slap it together. Just make sure that the wood is protected against some kind of rot. So use pressure treated wood, or something that isn't going to fall apart immediately. Besides the compost bin themselves, all you need is something to turn the compost, and that kind of depends on how big your compost is. So we got what I consider like a family-sized compost, and we used a fork to do that, a pitchfork, and that works really well. A shovel would also work. Again, depends on how big a setup it is. You know, if you got a trowel, just go for that, like a little garden trowel, or like those little hooks, like the little raptor hook gardening things, that would work. Yeah, you know, something like that. But all the ingredients break down to two main categories, and that's carbon and nitrogen. There are lots of other things going on inside the compost, but for a nice simple view of the compost, we think about everything that goes into it as either having more carbon or more nitrogen. We want to have a ratio between the two, a relationship between the two. So for every 1 pound of nitrogen that we have in there, we want 25 pounds of carbon. And that relationship, that 1 to 25 relationship, is what makes a good compost. And the carbon will do things like add energy to the system. The carbon is where the heat comes from. When you put your hand on the compost and it's hot, that's where the carbon is going. It's going and bursting into energetic power that's coming out of the little bugaboo that live in there. The bugaboo get so hot, they're just so excited to be decongesting compost that they actually get hot, and they start making the environment hot. The nitrogen in your compost will help your little bugaboo grow and reproduce and help oxidize the carbon, so make the carbon useful to do stuff, basically. And we need both of those things in the right amount, but the right amount really doesn't matter to you. The trick with compost is don't worry about this. I'm just telling you because that's like a thing you should know about compost. There is a balance you're shooting for, but that balance is really like, don't put too much of one thing in there. So like if you have to have a 5-acre lawn and you just mowed the lawn, don't put all of your grass clippings in one spot. Spread them out, maybe save a little bit for later, but also mix some food scraps in there. Get different stuff mixed together. So in general, the nitrogen stuff comes from inside your house, and the carbon stuff comes from outside your house. What you're shooting for is a balance of greens and browns. The greens are things like leaves, grass, and food scraps. The browns are things like stalks, paper, and wood chips, the stuff that's going to take longer to break down, but the green stuff makes the brown stuff break down. So if you've ever had like a big pile of twigs and they stick around for years and years and years, it's because they had no green stuff to help them break down. So your two ingredients are the green stuff and the brown stuff. And there's two other ingredients that make it all work. Oxygen, and that's like where you go in and you turn the compost. That's why you're turning it. The bugaboo that live in there need to breathe just like us. They do aerobic activity inside the soil. And when you turn the compost over, you're just kind of helping them breathe a little bit better, and they love it, and they love you for it. All living things also need water. So that's the fourth ingredient. So we want carbon, nitrogen, or greens and browns, and we want water and oxygen. Those are the 4 elemental ingredients of any good compost. You can put all sorts of stuff in the compost, but not everything. There are a few rules for bad no-no stuff. The first thing and the biggest thing is animal products. Meat and milk and cheese, things like that. Just don't do it. Not even bones. The bones will take forever to break down, but the animal products will bring in bacteria and encourage types of bugaboo that we really don't want in there that creates all sorts of problems. Things like banana peels or eggshells might be really hard for it to break down. If you really want to put those in there, make sure to crush them up or cut them or shred them in some way so they're in little tiny pieces so they break down faster. So a thing we have is avocado shells, the outside bit of the avocado. Those don't ever really break down. So if you tear those up, they'll break down faster. There we go. That's all we need to make a compost bin run. It does take a few months to go through the whole process. Just keep an eye on it, check on your compost as it moves along. If it looks a little dry, give it a little water. If it looks a little wet, cover it up a little bit, but largely you'll get a feel for it. The key is you're trying to make the perfect habitat for worms. So think about what worms like. Nice, loose, lots of oxygen, a little bit of water, but not enough to drown in. That's your goal. You are now officially a worm farmer. That's it for this week's folk. If you like what you see here, subscribe button makes me feel good. So please consider just giving a click on that little red booger. But otherwise, we're going to be on to another exciting topic next week. So please do join in, and we'll see you then. Okay. Bye 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 bye.